Is going to look at neurons. Neurons are specialized nerve cells that carry impulses to, from, and within the central nervous system. Here is a basic neuron. Now, there are different types of neurons based on their structure. They have unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar neurons. This is a multipolar neuron, and it's the type of neuron that we're going to look at for our diagram, and we're not going to cover the different types of neurons based on polarity in this screencast. And so we'll just look at this, which is a multipolar neuron. The first thing to look at when you're looking at this diagram is which direction the impulse is traveling. That will tell you a good bit of starting information. So here we can see that the impulse starts in the left and goes to the right. On the left side, or the receiving end of the neuron, you have dendrites. Dendrites are little branched processes that receive information. They receive this information from sensory receptors or from the neuron before them. Here you have the cell body, or the soma. Within it, you have a nucleus, just like most cells. Then the impulse will travel down the axon until it reaches these branched axon terminals. From the axon terminal, the impulse is then going to go to the next neuron or to an effector. The axon is covered in a myelin sheath. It's an insulating sheath, very similar to the outside kind of rubbery plastic coating on an electric wire or a phone charger. What it does is it insulates the axon, and it keeps the message, the impulse, moving quickly and smoothly from one end of the neuron to the other. Here you'll see individual cells called Schwann cells, and they meet at a node of Ranvier. So that's our basic structure of a neuron. There are three types of neurons that we'll talk about based on their function. Again, you can classify neurons based on their polarity, which is their structure, but we're going to just look at their classification based on function. So you have three types of neurons based on function: sensory or afferent neurons, interneurons, and motor or efferent neurons. So you're going to have impulses going from the peripheral nervous system to the central nervous system, from the central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system, and then within the central nervous system. So we will look at each of these individually. The first type we'll look at are sensory or afferent neurons. These are going towards the central nervous system. So they're going to collect and then transfer sensory information in the peripheral nervous system and send it back towards the brain and the spinal cord. They have specialized receptor ends on their dendrites, or their dendrites are really close to sensory receptor cells. It just depends on the location within the body and what kind of information they're collecting. These changes in whatever they're measuring, whether it's sight or touch or pain or temperature or blood sugar, are going to trigger impulses to be carried along the afferent neurons to the central nervous system, again, the brain or the spinal cord. Within the central nervous system, so the brain or the spinal cord, you have interneurons. Interneurons go between, and they're going to transfer information from one part of the central nervous system to another. They're going to link other neurons. The interneurons, as being part of the central nervous system, are important for transferring these impulses that are responsible for the integrative functions of the nervous system. So this is processing and interpreting information, interpreting it, and then determining the motor response. Finally, we have motor or efferent neurons. These neurons are going to conduct impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors. Effectors are what carry out an action. These can either be muscle contraction or gland secretion. It can be skeletal, smooth, or cardiac muscle when we're talking about muscle contraction. But the motor or efferent neurons are passing this decision on to the effectors from the central nervous system. So just a quick summary. These are the types of neurons based on their function as plays out kind of as a system or a unit. So you have sensory receptors or the sensory dendrites of an afferent neuron. And this impulse, the information, is going to be sent to the interneurons in the central nervous system. The interneurons are going to transfer information from one part of the central nervous system to another until it reaches a motor neuron, which leaves the central nervous system and transfers instructions about some sort of action or decision to an effector, which is either a muscle or a gland. And again, that muscle can be voluntary, so skeletal muscle, or involuntary, smooth or cardiac muscle. So that is a quick overview of neurons and their functions.